5 years after humanity's great choice, the galaxy was unrecognizable. President Kim Hee-jin, now serving her second term, stood before the new Galactic Assembly on the neutral world of Unity Station. Representatives from over 300 species gathered in the Great Hall, debating trade agreements and cultural exchanges instead of conquest and domination. The transformation had not been easy. In the early days after the hegemony's fall, dozens of species had attempted to fill the power vacuum. Some tried to recreate their own versions of the old empire. Others descended into civil wars as different factions fought for control of their worlds. But the Forerunner installations, now governed by the Galactic Oversight Council, prevented the worst outcomes. They stopped genocides before they could begin, ended slavery wherever it appeared, and disabled weapons of mass destruction. But they did not choose governments, settle trade disputes, or impose cultural values. Captain Lee Yun-seo had become humanity's chief diplomat, spending her days helping newly freed species navigate their first steps toward self-governance. The work was frustrating and slow, but deeply rewarding. Democracy is messy, she often told her team, but it is their mess to make. The former, hegemony worlds, provided the greatest challenges. Species that had lived under authoritarian rule for generations struggled with concepts like individual rights and democratic participation. Some worlds elected leaders who immediately tried to become dictators. Others fell into anarchic chaos when no one could agree on basic laws. Dr. Lim Ha-eun, now director of the Intercultural Understanding Institute, worked with teams of psychologists and sociologists to help these societies develop healthy governing systems. The process required patience and wisdom, qualities that the old hegemony had never possessed. Each species must find their own path to freedom, Lim explained to a group of newly elected Kalori representatives. We can share what we have learned, but we cannot walk the path for you. The Kalori had surprised everyone by adapting quickly to self-governance. Their natural empathy and community-oriented thinking made democratic processes easier for them than for more individualistic species. Within 2 years, they had established a stable federation of world states that became a model for other emerging democracies. The Vorthon, on the other hand, struggled with the transition. Their warrior culture valued strength and hierarchy, making democratic compromise difficult. But gradually, they developed a unique system that combined elected leadership with traditional honor codes. It was not perfect, but it was theirs. Admiral Song Ki-woo commanded the Galactic Peace Fleet, a joint force of volunteers from dozens of species. Their ships carried humanitarian supplies instead of weapons of conquest. When conflicts arose, they provided aid to refugees and facilitated negotiations between opposing sides. The fleet's most challenging mission came during the Thylaxi Civil War. 3 factions claimed to represent the true government of the former hegemony colony world. Each side accused the others of being puppets of hidden human influence. Song ordered his ships to provide medical aid and food to all sides equally, while offering to mediate discussions if requested. The Forerunner installations prevented the use of planet-killing weapons, but conventional warfare continued for months. The breakthrough came when young Thylaxi leaders from all 3 factions began meeting secretly. They had grown up during the hegemony occupation and shared memories of oppression that transcended their current political differences. With Song's encouragement, they gradually built a coalition government that none of the older leaders had thought possible. Back on Earth, Director Choi oversaw the gradual deactivation of the most dangerous Forerunner systems. The installations retained their peacekeeping functions, but their reality-altering capabilities were carefully restricted. Humanity had decided that no species, not even themselves, should wield such ultimate power. The installations are becoming what they always should have been, Choi explained to a gathering of galactic scientists. Tools for protection, not control. Shields, not swords. This work required unprecedented cooperation between species. Teams of researchers from across the galaxy worked together to understand and modify technology that had been built by beings far more advanced than any current civilization. The shared project helped build trust and understanding between former enemies. Captain Park Jin-woo, commanded the exploration vessel New Horizon, leading the first joint species mission beyond the galaxy's rim. His crew included humans, Kalori, Vorthan, former Vextar, and even some reformed hegemony officers who had proven their commitment to the new order. The mission discovered evidence that the Forerunners had not simply left the galaxy. They had gone to seed new civilizations in distant spiral arms. Perhaps someday their descendants would return to see what had grown in their absence. The galaxy is healing, Jin Woo reported during one of his regular transmissions to Earth. Species that were enemies for centuries are learning to work together. It is slow work, but it is good work. The healing was not complete. Some worlds remained closed to outsiders, suspicious of any external influence. Piracy and crime still existed, though the installations prevented the worst atrocities. And in the galaxy's outer regions, rumors persisted of hegemony remnants, plotting to restore their empire. But progress was undeniable. Trade networks flourished between species that had never communicated before the hegemony's fall. Cultural exchange programs helped beings understand each other's perspectives and traditions. Most importantly, a new generation was growing up that knew freedom as their birthright, not a gift from benevolent rulers. President Kim received regular reports from Captain Oh Dong-woo, who led humanitarian missions throughout former hegemony territory. The young officer, who had once watched helplessly as human colonies burned, now helped rebuild entire civilizations. The children are different, he reported from a former slave world. They ask questions their parents never dared to think. They imagine futures their grandparents could never dream of. That is how we know the system is working. On Unity Station, the Galactic Assembly debated its first major crisis. A newly discovered species in the galactic core was developing weapons capable of destroying solar systems. Some representatives wanted immediate intervention. Others argued for diplomatic contact first. Kim watched the debate with satisfaction. 5 years ago, such a decision would have been made by hegemony overlords or forerunner machines. Now it was being argued by representatives of free peoples, each voice carrying equal weight regardless of their species' size or power. The decision reached was typically messy and democratic. A diplomatic mission would make first contact while peacekeeping forces stood ready to intervene if necessary. It was not perfect, but it reflected the will of the galactic community rather than the judgment of a single ruler. Dr. Lim made one final discovery in the Forerunner archives that provided closure to humanity's long journey. The ancient species had left one last message hidden in the deepest layers of their computer systems. It was addressed specifically to humanity, the species they had chosen to inherit their burden. To those who inherited our burden, the message read, we failed because we believed peace could be imposed from above. You succeeded because you proved it must be chosen from within. We tried to create perfect order and built a cage. You chose imperfect freedom and planted a garden. The message continued with something the Forerunners had never been able to achieve, a true gift with no strings attached. Hidden throughout the galaxy were archives of art, literature, music, and philosophy from thousands of extinct species. They had preserved these treasures not to control or educate, but simply to ensure that beauty and wisdom would not be lost forever. The stars are yours to guide, not rule, the message concluded. We give you our knowledge freely, as we should have done for others long ago. Use it wisely, use it well, and remember that the greatest strength lies not in the power to command, but in the wisdom to serve. Captain Jin Woo's exploration ship received the coordinates to the first of these hidden archives. As his diverse crew worked together to unlock the treasures of 100 lost civilizations, they embodied everything humanity had hoped to achieve. They were explorers, not conquerors, learners, not teachers, partners in the great work of building a better galaxy. Back on Earth, President Kim prepared for her final address as humanity's leader. In a few months, she would step down to make way for new leadership as democratic tradition demanded. She had guided her species through its greatest transformation, but the work was far from over. The galaxy is finally free, she would tell the assembled crowds. Free to make mistakes, free to learn from them, free to grow in ways we cannot imagine. That is the greatest gift we could give to the universe. The chance for every species to write its own story among the stars. The new dawn had come to the galaxy. Not the perfect sunrise the forerunners had tried to create, but the natural dawn that comes only after the darkness has been allowed to pass. It brought challenges and uncertainties, conflicts and compromises, but also hope and wonder and the infinite possibilities that freedom provides. Humanity had kept its promise. They had not become the monsters they fought. Instead, they had proven that sometimes the greatest strength. The galaxy held its breath as humanity grappled with the most dangerous gift in existence: absolute power. President Kim Hye-jin stood in the Forerunner Control Center beneath Seoul, surrounded by displays that showed her complete dominion over reality itself. She could reshape worlds, control the minds of entire species, or eliminate her enemies with a thought. The temptation was overwhelming. With the ancient systems at her command, Kim could end all suffering in the galaxy. No more wars, no more oppression, no more pain. She could create the perfect civilization that humanity had always dreamed of building. But Dr. Lim Ha-yoon's research painted a stark warning about the path ahead. The Forerunner archives revealed their gradual transformation from liberators to tyrants. It happened slowly, Lim explained to the Emergency Council. Each decision seemed reasonable at the time. Stop a war here, prevent suffering there. But every intervention made the next one easier to justify. The ancient record showed how the Forerunners had started with noble goals. They ended slavery, prevented genocides, and brought peace to warring species. But over time, they began making smaller decisions for other species. Which leaders were best for each world? Which technologies were safe to develop? Which ideas were too dangerous to think? Director Choi monitored the global reaction to humanity's new status. Some species are begging us to become their rulers, he reported. Others are preparing to fight us, but most are simply waiting to see what kind of galactic overlords we become. The Kalori had already surrendered completely, offering to serve humanity in any capacity. Their ambassador, Kel Thara, prostrated herself before Kim's representatives. Great inheritors, we submit to your wisdom. Command us as you see fit. But other species reacted with defiance. The Vorthan Empire sent a final battle fleet toward human space, determined to die fighting rather than submit to new masters. Captain Nam Soo-jin watched from her orbital platform as the proud warriors approached Earth, knowing their weapons could not harm the ancient installations. The Vorthan fleet never fired a shot. As they entered the Sol system, their ships simply stopped moving, just like the hegemony forces before them. But this time Kim made a different choice. Instead of leaving them trapped, she ordered the installations to transport the Vorthan crews to a neutral station. Admiral Song Ki-woo met with the Vorthan commander, General Morthak, in person. The alien warrior expected to be executed or enslaved, but Song offered him something unprecedented, an explanation. "We do not want to rule you," Song told the confused general. "We want to free you from the cycle of domination that has plagued this galaxy for millennia. But freedom cannot be imposed. It must be chosen." Meanwhile, the situation with the trapped hegemony fleets grew more complex. Many of the conquered species within their ranks had begun organizing rebellions against their Vextar commanders. But without leadership or coordination, these revolts often turned chaotic and violent. Captain Oh Dong-woo coordinated with resistance leaders throughout the frozen fleet. The young Zephyrian officer Kethara had emerged as a voice for the enslaved species. "We need your help," she pleaded with O. "But we do not want to trade Vextar masters for human ones." This sentiment was echoed throughout the galaxy. Species that had suffered under hegemony rule were grateful for humanity's intervention, but wary of new overlords. They had seen too many liberators become oppressors to trust easily. Dr. Lim discovered more troubling information in the Forerunner archives. The ancient civilization tried to solve this problem too, she reported to President Kim. They created autonomous systems that were supposed to govern fairly without direct Forerunner involvement. But even those systems reflected Forerunner. biases, and values. The file showed how the Forerunners had struggled with the same ethical dilemmas now facing humanity. How do you help other species without controlling them? How do you prevent suffering without removing choice? How do you use ultimate power responsibly? Kim found herself studying the Forerunners' final records with growing understanding. Their last emperor, Aeon Thera the Wise, had written extensively about the corrupting nature of absolute authority. Power does not corrupt suddenly, one passage read. It corrupts through countless small compromises with conscience. Each justified. Decision makes the next easier to accept. The breaking point came when several species formally requested human governance. The Kalori wanted protection from stronger neighbors. The Thalaxi needed help rebuilding after hegemony devastation. Even some former Vextar colonies begged humanity to take control rather than face chaos and civil war. We could do so much good, argued Defense Minister Yoon Jae-min during a heated cabinet meeting. We could prevent wars, end poverty, stop injustice. Is it not our responsibility to help those who cannot help themselves? But Kim remembered the warnings in the Forerunner archives. Every galactic tyrant in history had used similar justifications. The Vextar themselves claimed to bring order to chaos, strength to weakness, purpose to aimless species. The decision came down to a simple question. Would humanity repeat the cycle, or find the courage to break it? Captain Park Jin-woo, brother of the fallen hero Bora, made an observation that crystallized Kim's thinking. While coordinating relief efforts for freed hegemony slaves, he noticed something important. The species that are thriving are not the ones we help the most. They are the ones we help least, but support in making their own choices. This insight aligned with humanity's own history. Humans had prospered in space not because they were guided or controlled by more advanced species, but because they were allowed to find their own path. The Forerunner guidance beacons had shown humanity the way to the stars, but humans had chosen how to use that knowledge. Kim made her decision in a global broadcast that would define humanity's legacy. We have been offered the power to rule the galaxy, she announced to the watching universe. Our ancestors, the Forerunners, wielded such power for millions of years. They created a perfect civilization where no one suffered, no one fought, and no one was free. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some humans protested that she was throwing away humanity's chance to create a better galaxy. Alien species responded with mixtures of relief, disappointment, and confusion. We choose a different path, Kim continued. We will use our inheritance not to rule, but to ensure that no species can rule over others. Not the hegemony, not the Forerunners, and not humanity itself. The plan she outlined was radical in its simplicity. The Forerunner installations would be reprogrammed with a single prime directive: prevent any species from achieving galactic dominance. They would stop genocides, end slavery, and prevent wars of conquest, but they would not impose specific governments or ways of life. Director Choi worked with teams of scientists and philosophers to implement this vision. The ancient systems were incredibly sophisticated, capable of distinguishing between defensive and aggressive actions, between protection and control, between help and domination. But the most important change was in how the systems would be governed. Instead of responding to human commands, they would operate according to principles agreed upon by representatives of all galactic species. No single civilization would control the network. This means giving up our advantage, warned Admiral Song during the final planning sessions. Once we implement these changes, humanity will be just one species among many. Kim nodded, understanding the implications. That is exactly what we want to be. Partners in a galactic community, not its rulers. The transformation began with the liberation of the hegemony fleets. Instead of destroying or permanently imprisoning the Vextar forces, the installations transported them to neutral worlds where they would face justice from the species they had oppressed. But even this was done according to agreed-upon legal principles, not human decree. General Thexerak himself was tried before a tribunal of formerly enslaved species. His fate would be decided not by human judgment, but by the victims of his crimes. Some called for execution, others for life imprisonment. but the final sentence reflected a growing galactic consensus. Exile to a world where he could harm no one, but might learn to become something better than what he had been. As the new system took effect, humanity began the delicate process of stepping back from absolute power. The installations continued to function, preventing the worst excesses of galactic civilization while allowing maximum freedom for individual species and worlds. The galaxy watched nervously as this experiment in distributed power began. Many species expected humanity to change their minds and seize control at the first sign of trouble. Others worried that chaos would result from the lack of strong central authority, but President Kim remained committed to the path she had chosen. The Forerunners failed because they could not resist the temptation to fix every problem they encountered, she told her advisors. We will succeed because we understand that some problems must be solved by those who experience them. The hegemony's grand fleet approached the Sol system like an unstoppable tide of destruction. 3 entire armadas, representing the combined military might of the Vextar Empire and their enslaved species, moved toward Earth with weapons capable of cracking planets. General Thexerac stood on his command bridge, confident that humanity's bluff was about to be called. Admiral Song Ki-woo watched the approaching enemy from his flagship, the Earth's Shield. His human fleet looked pathetically small compared to the alien armada, but Song's face showed no fear. Behind him, tactical displays showed the positions of ancient installations throughout the solar system. Sir, they outnumber us 1,000 to 1, reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Park Jin-woo. Should we pull back to Earth's orbital defenses? No, Song replied calmly. We hold position. Let them come. As the first wave of hegemony ships passed Mars, the red planet's surface began to crack and split. Massive structures erupted from beneath the Martian crust, rising like metal mountains toward space. These were not human constructions but ancient Forerunner installations that had waited beneath Mars for thousands of years. Captain Nam Soo-jin watched from her orbital platform above Earth as impossible energies flowed from the Martian structures. Her instruments showed power readings that broke every known law of physics. Command, are you seeing this? The energy output is beyond measurement. The hegemony's advance fleet suddenly stopped moving. Not destroyed, not damaged, but completely, motionless in space. Their ships hung in the void like statues, unable to move forward or backward. Even their communication systems went silent. General Thexerac's confusion turned to growing horror as similar reports came in from across human space. Every world that humans had colonized was revealing ancient installations. Structures that had been hidden beneath cities, oceans, and mountain ranges were rising to the surface and activating. This is impossible, whispered Chief Scientist Vexmore, staring at his readings. The power levels are incomprehensible. These installations are drawing energy from the quantum vacuum itself. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. The installations were not limited to human colonies. Similar structures were awakening on worlds throughout the galaxy, including planets that humans had never officially visited. The network was vast beyond imagination. Dr. Lim Ha-yoon worked frantically in her laboratory on Earth, analyzing the flood of data from archaeological sites across human territory. The truth that emerged was staggering. President Kim, you need to see this. The Forerunner civilization was not just advanced. They controlled the entire galaxy for millions of years. The evidence was overwhelming. Every habitable world in known space showed signs of ancient Forerunner presence. They had built a galactic infrastructure that made current civilization look primitive by comparison. Cities that spanned continents, energy networks that connected star systems, and technologies that treated space and time like construction materials. But if they were so powerful, what happened to them? Kim asked, studying the archaeological data. Director Choi had been analyzing Forerunner records for weeks, decoding their ancient language with the help of the awakening installations. The truth he discovered was both inspiring and terrifying. They chose to leave. Their own records speak of the corrupting nature of absolute power. They became everything they had once fought against. The files showed the Forerunners' final years. They had achieved perfect control over their galaxy, eliminating war, disease, and suffering. But in doing so, they had also eliminated choice. Every species lived according to Forerunner design. Free will became a memory. They realized they had become tyrants. Choi continued. So they made the hardest decision in galactic history. They abandoned their empire and left the galaxy, hoping that someday a worthy species would inherit their legacy and use it more wisely. Meanwhile, the trapped hegemony fleets hung helplessly in space. Their crews were alive and unharmed, but completely unable to control their ships. The Forerunner installations had created fields that selectively altered local physics, making certain actions impossible while leaving others unaffected. Captain Oh Dong-woo led a reconnaissance mission to study the frozen enemy fleet. What he found surprised him. Many of the alien crews were trying to communicate, not to threaten or negotiate, but to ask for help. Admiral, they are not all here by choice. Most of these species were conquered and forced to fight for the hegemony. The reports painted a different picture of the enemy. The Vextar Empire ruled through fear and brutality, using conquered species as soldiers in their wars of expansion. Many of the crews trapped in the frozen ships were themselves victims of hegemony oppression. Admiral Song faced a crucial decision. The Forerunner systems gave humanity complete control over their enemies. They could destroy the entire hegemony fleet instantly, or keep them trapped forever. But Song remembered humanity's values, the principles that had guided them for 3 centuries. Open communication channels to all enemy vessels, he ordered. Let us speak to their crews directly. The response was immediate. Thousands of voices from dozens of species flooded the communication network. The Kalori begged for mercy. The Vorthan demanded honorable combat. But most surprising were the conquered species who asked not for their freedom, but for humanity's help in freeing others. A young Zephyrian officer named Cathara spoke for many when she said, "We were forced to fight. Our families are held hostage to ensure our loyalty. If you can stop the hegemony, you will save billions of innocent lives." President Kim received these communications in her crisis center deep beneath Seoul. She faced the most important decision in galactic history. The Forerunner systems offered unlimited power, the ability to reshape the galaxy according to human will. She could end all conflict forever by imposing human values on every species. But Dr. Lim's research revealed why the Forerunners had ultimately failed. They started with good intentions too, she warned Kim. They wanted to create a perfect galaxy where no one would suffer. But perfection imposed from above is still tyranny. The ancient Forerunner records were full of cautionary tales. Species that had been improved for their own good. Wars ended by eliminating the concept of violence from entire populations. Suffering eliminated by removing the capacity for independent thought. We have a choice to make, Kim told her advisors. We can use this power to create the galaxy we think is best, or we can find a way to let the galaxy choose its own path. Director Choi brought up displays showing the full scope of the Forerunner network. The systems are designed to respond to the moral character of their operators. They became more controlling over time because the Forerunners gradually lost their connection to the value of individual choice. The installations throughout human space pulsed with energy, waiting for direction from their new inheritors. They could eliminate the hegemony instantly, or transform their enemies into peaceful beings, or even reshape the galaxy's very structure. The power was intoxicating in its scope. But Kim remembered the lessons of human history. Every tyrant in history had claimed to be acting for the greater good. Every oppressor had justified their actions as necessary for peace and order. The Forerunners had fallen into the same trap, despite their good intentions. We will not become what we fought against, she decided. If we use this power to impose our will on others, we become no better than the hegemony. We need to find another way. Song's response came through the communication network, broadcasting to every ship in the Frozen Fleet. Crews of the Hegemony Armada, you are not our enemies. You are victims of the same tyranny that threatens humanity. We offer you a choice that the hegemony never gave you: freedom. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Crews throughout the enemy fleet began to rebel against their Vextar commanders. The conquered species had been waiting for this moment, hoping that someone would finally stand up to their oppressors. But some species reacted differently. The proud Vorthon attempted to rally resistance until their entire battle group was instantly disabled by the Forerunner systems. The ancient installations could distinguish between aggressors and victims, responding appropriately to each. As news of the frozen fleet spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to make their own choices. Some former hegemony subjects declared independence. Others offered to help humanity in whatever came next. But all of them recognized that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. General Thexrak, still trapped on his immobilized flagship, finally understood what humanity had inherited. These were not weapons in any conventional sense. They were tools of absolute authority over the fundamental forces of reality. The Forerunners had not merely ruled the galaxy. They had owned it at the most basic level of existence. The galaxy waited to see what humanity would do with such power. Would they repeat the Forerunners' mistakes or find a way to break the cycle of domination that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia? The choice would determine the fate of every living being among the stars. President Kim Hye-jin stood before the cameras in the Global Assembly Hall, knowing that her next words would be heard across the entire galaxy. Behind her, screens displayed evidence of hegemony war crimes and documents about their planned great cleansing. Every species in known space would receive this broadcast. "People of the galaxy," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. "For 300 years, humanity has walked quietly among the stars. We have been peaceful traders, curious explorers, and respectful neighbors. We followed your laws, honored your treaties, and caused no trouble." The broadcast reached every inhabited system through the Galactic Communication Network. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives from dozens of species watched with growing unease. This did not sound like a surrender message. "But you have mistaken our peaceful nature for weakness," Kim continued. "The Vextar Empire has attacked our worlds, enslaved our people, and threatened our very existence. They call this enforcement action. We call it genocide." General Thexrak watched the broadcast from his flagship. Surrounded by his fleet commanders, the reptilian warrior laughed at the human's boldness. "Listen to this primitive species threaten us. Their weapons cannot even scratch our shields." On the screen, President Kim's expression grew colder. "The hegemony believes they are the strongest power in the galaxy. They have conquered hundreds of species and enslaved billions of beings. But they have never faced humanity when we are truly threatened." She paused, letting her words sink in across the galaxy. In refugee camps throughout neutral space, survivors of conquered species listened with desperate hope. Could the humans really stand against the hegemony? "Evidence shows that the Vextar Empire is preparing for what they call the Great Cleansing," Kim announced. "They plan to eliminate entire species to reduce competition for resources. This is not conquest. This is extermination on a galactic scale." The Galactic Council erupted in chaos. Many species had heard whispers of the Great Cleansing in ancient legends, but they had dismissed them as myths. Now they saw documented proof that the hegemony was preparing to commit genocide against billions of innocent beings. Admiral Song Ki-woo appeared on the broadcast, standing beside President Kim. His uniform was crisp and his expression was deadly serious. "We offer the Vextar Empire one final opportunity to avoid catastrophe. Withdraw from all human territory within 48 hours. Release all enslaved populations. Submit to galactic justice for your crimes." Thexrak's laughter echoed through his bridge. "Or what, you will throw rocks at our ships?" Song's next words wiped the smile from the alien general's face. "Or discover why humanity has remained so peaceful for 3 centuries. We were not weak. We were restrained. But restraint has its limits." The broadcast showed footage from across human space. Strange structures were rising from the surfaces of dozens of worlds, including planets that humanity had never officially colonized. Ancient installations that had been hidden for millennia were coming online, their energy signatures unlike anything known to galactic science. Dr. Lim Ha-yoon appeared on screen next, displaying her research findings. "These installations are not human technology. They were built by an ancient civilization that once ruled this galaxy. The same civilization that guided humanity into space 3 centuries ago. The implications hit the galactic audience like a physical blow. Humanity was not just another primitive species. They were the inheritors of the Forerunner legacy, the chosen successors to the galaxy's former rulers. In the Galactic Council chambers, panic began to spread. The Kalori representative stood with shaking tentacles. The Forerunners, they were real? The ancient stories were true? President Kim's image returned to the broadcast. The choice is yours, General Thexrock. 48 hours. End this madness now. Or learn why the Forerunners never needed to fight wars. They simply decided who was allowed to exist in their galaxy. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Within hours, refugee ships began arriving at human space stations. The crews spoke in hushed tones about ancient warnings passed down through generations. Many species had legends about the Forerunners, powerful beings who could reshape reality itself. Most had assumed they were just stories. Captain Nam Soo-jin monitored the arriving ships from her orbital defense platform above Earth. She had never seen such a mixture of fear and hope in alien faces. Some came seeking protection. Others came to witness what they believed would be humanity's last stand. But Nam could see the energy readings from the ancient installations throughout human space. Whatever was waking up out there was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The power signatures were off the charts, defying all known laws of physics. General Thexrock called an emergency meeting with his fleet commanders. The hegemony's own scientists were studying the strange installations that had appeared throughout human territory. Their reports were disturbing. The energy output is impossible, reported Chief Scientist Vexmore. These structures are generating more power than entire star systems. Our instruments cannot even properly measure what they are doing. It must be some kind of illusion, Thexrock insisted. Humans are clever with their tricks and deceptions. They are trying to make us believe. They have weapons they do not possess. But even as he spoke, more installations were activating across the galaxy, not just in human space but on worlds throughout the spiral arms. Ancient Forerunner sites that had been dormant for thousands of years were coming online in response to humanity's call. The Vorthon Empire, proud warriors who had never bowed to anyone, sent an urgent message to their fleet commanders. Do not engage human forces under any circumstances. Ancient records speak of the Forerunner inheritance. If humans truly possess it, conventional warfare is meaningless. Other species reached similar conclusions. The peaceful humans they had, known for centuries, were not what they seemed. They carried the legacy of the galaxy's most powerful civilization, and that legacy was finally awakening. On Earth, Director Choi monitored the activation process from his underground facility. The systems were responding faster than he had expected, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Energy flowed through networks that spanned the entire galaxy, connecting installations on thousands of worlds. The Forerunners built this network over millions of years, he explained to President Kim. It was designed to maintain order and protect life throughout the galaxy. But it requires a species with the right moral character to operate it properly. Kim watched the displays showing power levels that defied comprehension. And they chose humanity for this responsibility? They chose us because of our peaceful nature, not despite it, Choi replied. The Forerunners learned that raw power without wisdom leads to tyranny. They wanted their successors to understand the value of life and the importance of choice, as the 48-hour deadline approached. Tension built throughout the galaxy. The hegemony fleets remained at the edge of human space, their commanders unsure whether to advance or retreat. Some urged immediate attack before the humans could complete whatever they were doing. Others counseled caution. Captain Oh Dong-woo led a small reconnaissance mission to observe the alien fleets. What he saw worried him more than any human weapon could. The hegemony ships were not preparing for battle. They were preparing for extermination. Planet-killing weapons were being readied for use against Earth and every other human world. They planned to glass our entire civilization, he reported to Admiral Song. Whatever we are going to do, it needs to happen soon. But the ancient systems were still activating, drawing power from sources beyond galactic science. The installations were not weapons in any conventional sense. They were something far more fundamental, tools that could alter the basic laws of physics within their area of effect. As the deadline approached its final hours, President Kim made one last appeal to the galaxy. We did not ask for this inheritance, we did not seek this power, but we will not allow the hegemony to commit genocide against innocent species. The age of tyranny ends now. The Forerunner installations reached full activation just as General Thexrock gave the order to attack. His massive fleet surged forward toward human space, carrying weapons that could destroy entire solar systems. But as they crossed the boundary into human territory, something impossible happened. The laws of physics themselves seemed to change around the alien ships. They found themselves unable to move, unable to fire their weapons, unable even to communicate with their home base. The hegemony's mighty war machine simply stopped, frozen in space like insects trapped in amber. And throughout the galaxy, ancient voices spoke for the first time in millennia, carrying humanity's message to every inhabited world. The warning has been given. The choice has been made. Let justice begin. 3 weeks after New Sol burned, the aliens struck again. This time they hit 3 human colonies at once. Captain Yoon Jae-sung watched from his command ship as enemy vessels surrounded the Hanyang system. His small fleet was humanity's newest and best, but against the hegemony ships they looked like toys. The Vextar had learned from their first attack. They did not just destroy the human colonies quickly this time. Instead, they landed troops and rounded up survivors. Millions of humans were herded into metal cages like animals, then loaded onto transport ships. Those who resisted were shot in front of the others as examples. Yoon's ships tried to intervene, but the alien shields were too strong. His weapons barely left marks on the enemy hulls. The hegemony ships moved slowly and confidently, ignoring human attacks like a person might ignore insects buzzing around their head. "Sir, we cannot break through their defenses," reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Kim Min-ho. "Should we retreat?" Yoon watched the screens showing human civilians being loaded into slave ships. Children cried for their parents. Families were separated forever. His jaw tightened with anger and determination. "No retreat, keep firing. Make them remember that humans do not give up." The battle lasted 6 hours. One by one, Yoon's ships were destroyed by the superior alien weapons. His own vessel, the Soul's Pride, was the last one left. The ship's hull was cracked and burning, but Yoon kept fighting until the very end. His final message was broadcast throughout human space. "This is Captain Yoon Jae-sung of the Earth Defense Fleet. Tell them we died standing. Tell them we never surrendered. And tell them to make these aliens pay for what they have done." The Soul's Pride exploded in a brilliant flash, taking several alien fighters with it. But the hegemony fleet continued its work, loading the last human slaves and stripping the colonies of anything valuable. On Earth, riots broke out in every major city. People demanded that the government take action against the aliens. They had watched their fellow humans die fighting impossible odds while politicians talked about diplomacy and peaceful solutions. President Kim stood before the Global Assembly, facing angry representatives from around the world. The footage from Hanyang played on screens behind her, showing human children being dragged away from their parents. "What are you doing to stop this?" shouted Representative Park from Korea. "Our people are being enslaved while you hold meetings." "We are exploring all options," Kim replied, but her words sounded weak even to herself. The truth was that humanity's conventional military could not defeat the hegemony. Every battle proved that more clearly. Director Choi watched from the back of the assembly hall. He had spent the past weeks preparing the systems that humanity's ancestors had left behind. But activating them would change everything. Once those systems came online, humanity could never go back to being the peaceful, simple species they had been. After the assembly, Kim met with Choi in his secure laboratory deep beneath the city. The room was filled with displays showing energy readings from across human space. Strange patterns were appearing on sensors, signatures that did not match any known technology. "The activation process is nearly complete," Choi explained, pointing to the readings. "But I need you to understand what we are doing. These systems were not built by humans. They were left for us by the previous rulers of this galaxy." Kim stared at the displays. Previous rulers, what are you talking about? 300 years ago, when humanity first developed faster than light travel, we found guidance beacons throughout space. We thought they were natural phenomena that helped us navigate between stars. But they were actually a network, built by an ancient civilization. The president sat down heavily. You are saying aliens helped humanity reach space? Not helped. Chose. Choi brought up new displays showing archaeological sites on dozens of worlds. This ancient species, we call them the Forerunners, once ruled the entire galaxy. They had technology that makes the hegemony look primitive, but they disappeared thousands of years ago, leaving only their installations behind. Kim studied the evidence Choi showed her. Ancient structures on worlds humanity had never officially explored. Technology hidden beneath human colonies that had been there since before the first settlers arrived. It was overwhelming. Why did they choose us? She asked. We do not know for certain, but their systems only respond to humans. Maybe they saw something in our species that reminded them of themselves, or maybe they simply needed someone to inherit their responsibilities. On a distant research station, Dr. Lim Ha-eun made her own disturbing discovery. She had been studying alien refugees who had escaped from hegemony territory. Many of them spoke of ancient legends about a great cleansing that happened every few thousand years. The stories were similar across different species. A powerful empire would arise and conquer much of the galaxy. Then, when resources became scarce, they would systematically eliminate entire species to reduce competition. The hegemony was not just expanding their territory. They were preparing to commit genocide on a galactic scale. Lim sent her findings to Earth immediately. The research confirmed what many had suspected. The attack on humanity was not random. The hegemony saw humans as a threat that needed to be eliminated before the Great Cleansing began. Meanwhile, more human colonies fell to alien attacks. The pattern was always the same. Overwhelming force, quick conquest, and mass enslavement of survivors. The hegemony wanted the galaxy to see what happened to species that resisted their rule. Captain Oh Dong-woo led evacuation efforts in the outer colonies, trying to save civilians before the aliens arrived. But there were too many worlds and not enough ships. For every 100 people he saved, 1,000 more were captured or killed. The psychological impact on humanity was severe. For 3 centuries, humans had lived peacefully among the stars. They had traded with aliens, shared knowledge, and built a civilization based on cooperation and exploration. Now they faced extinction or slavery, and their gentle nature seemed to be a fatal weakness. But in hidden facilities across human space, ancient systems continued to wake up. Energy readings spiked on sensors throughout the galaxy. Something vast and powerful was stirring after millennia of sleep. General Thexarak noticed the strange readings too, but his scientists could not identify their source. He assumed they were some kind of human desperation weapon, probably nuclear devices or chemical weapons. Such primitive tools would not save humanity from the hegemony's might. The Vextar commander prepared his final assault on human space. He would attack Earth itself and end this minor annoyance once and for all. The human homeworld would serve as an example to other species. This was what happened to those who defied the galactic hegemony. President Kim received Thexrak's ultimatum on a Tuesday morning. Earth had 72 hours to surrender unconditionally, or the aliens would demonstrate why no species had ever successfully resisted their empire. The message included footage of hegemony fleets massing at the edge of human territory, thousands of ships carrying weapons that could destroy planets. That evening, Kim made the hardest decision of her life. She authorized Director Choi to fully activate humanity's inheritance, whatever the consequences might be. The ancient systems that had waited for millennia were finally given permission to wake up completely. As the countdown to Earth's ultimatum continued, strange things began happening throughout human space. Asteroids that had drifted peacefully for centuries suddenly changed course. Dead moons showed signs of activity. And deep beneath the surface of dozens of worlds, structures older than human civilization began to rise. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had not been wandering the stars alone. They had been guided, protected, and prepared for this moment. The Forerunners were gone, but their legacy lived on through the species they had chosen to inherit their power. But power came with responsibility, and responsibility came with choices. Soon humanity would have to decide what kind of species they wanted to become. The morning sky above New Sol burned red as the alien ships came down like falling stars. Admiral Quan Tai-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the screens with growing horror. The enemy vessels were massive, each one larger than any human ship ever built. Their dark hulls gleamed with strange lights as they moved through the atmosphere like predators hunting prey. Captain Park Min-soo's voice crackled through the communications system. His small defense squadron was already engaging the invaders, near the planet's orbital stations. "Admiral, their shields are too strong. Our weapons barely scratch them." Quan gripped the railing as another human ship exploded on his screen. The aliens moved with cold precision, their advanced weapons cutting through human defenses like knives through paper. In less than an hour, most of New Sol's orbital defense platforms were gone. The planet's surface cities were next. Lieutenant Commander Lee Bo-ra managed her ship through the chaos, dodging enemy fire while trying to evacuate civilians from the dying orbital stations. Her crew worked frantically to save as many lives as possible. She watched in helpless anger as the alien bombardment began hitting the planet below. Entire city blocks vanished in brilliant flashes of light. The enemy commander's message came through all human communication channels. General Thexrak of the Vextar Empire spoke in perfect human language, his voice cold and emotionless. The reptilian alien appeared on every screen, his scaled face showing no mercy. "Humans of New Sol, you have resisted the galactic hegemony. This is the price of defiance. Your species will now provide workers for our empire, or more worlds will burn like this one." Bo-ra felt sick as she watched the alien ship systematically destroy everything humans had built on New Sol over the past 50 years. Millions of people lived on that planet. Now most of them were dead, and the survivors would become slaves. The few human ships that survived the battle limped away from New Sol, carrying refugees and terrible news. Bo-ra's damaged vessel barely made it to the nearest human station. The footage she brought with her showed the complete destruction of a human world in a single day. Back on Earth, President Kim Hye-jin sat in the emergency meeting room deep beneath Sol. The other government leaders looked shocked and frightened as they watched the recordings from New Sol. The alien attack had been swift and brutal, leaving no doubt about the hegemony's power. "How many ships do they have?" asked Defense Minister Yoon Jae-min, his face pale. Admiral Song Ki-woo, head of Earth's defense fleet, shook his head grimly. "Our intelligence reports suggest they have thousands of ships across their empire. What hit New Sol was probably just a small task force." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. Humanity had been in space for 300 years, but they had always been peaceful. They traded with other species, explored new worlds, and followed all the galactic laws. They had never needed a large military because they avoided conflicts. Director Choi Sang-woo of the Strategic Weapons Division cleared his throat. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke in these meetings, but now everyone looked at him. "Madam President, there are things we need to discuss. Things that have been kept secret since humanity first went to space." Kim Hye-jin frowned. "What kind of things?" "Projects that were started long ago when our first ships left Earth. Contingency plans that were never meant to be used." Choi's voice was steady, but his eyes showed worry. "We always hoped we would never need them." The president studied the older man's face. She had known Choi for many years, and she had never seen him look this serious. "Are you talking about hidden weapons?" "Something like that," Choi replied carefully. "But first, we need to see how far the hegemony is willing to go. If they are truly planning to enslave humanity, then we may have no choice but to use what our ancestors left us." Outside the meeting room, news of New Sol's destruction spread across Earth like wildfire. Protesters filled the streets of every major city, demanding that the government do something to protect humanity. Parents held their children closer, wondering if Earth would be next. In space stations throughout human territory, people watched the news reports with growing fear. The hegemony had destroyed an entire world in hours. What chance did humanity have against such power? Captain Nam Soo-jin commanded the orbital defense platform above Earth. She had served in space for 20 years, but she had never seen anything like the alien ships in the footage from New Seoul. Their technology was far ahead of anything humans possessed. If they came to Earth, the defense platforms would not last long. Dr. Lim Ha-eun worked in her laboratory on a distant research station, studying alien cultures and languages. She had always believed that different species could live together, peacefully. But the news from New Seoul changed everything. The hegemony was not interested in peace. They wanted slaves and resources, nothing more. As night fell on Earth, President Kim made her decision. She authorized Director Choi to begin preparations for whatever secret projects he had mentioned. She did not know what those projects involved, but she knew humanity needed every advantage they could get. The Galactic Council met an emergency session on the neutral world of Harmony Station. Representatives from dozens of species debated what to do about the human situation. But most of them were too afraid of the hegemony to take any action. They had seen what happened to species that opposed the Vextar Empire. Some council members spoke quietly about humanity's fate. The humans had been good neighbors, honest traders, and peaceful explorers, but they were also weak and small compared to the hegemony. It was sad, but there was nothing anyone could do. General Thexrak's second message came 3 days after New Seoul's destruction. This time he addressed Earth directly. His reptilian face filled screens across the human homeworld as he delivered his ultimatum. Humans of Earth, you have seen what happens to those who resist. You will now provide 10 million workers for our mining operations and another 5 million for our construction projects. You have 30 days to begin shipments or we will demonstrate our power again. The message ended with images of other conquered worlds. Humans saw alien species working as slaves in terrible conditions, mining dangerous materials, and building massive structures for their hegemony masters. This was the future that awaited humanity if they surrendered. President Kim watched the message from her office, her hands clenched into fists. She would not let her people become slaves. But she also knew that conventional weapons could not defeat the hegemony. Humanity needed something else, something the aliens would not expect. She picked up her secure phone and called Director Choi. Whatever those old projects are, we need them now. How long will it take to make them ready? Choi's voice was quiet but determined. The systems have been maintained and updated over the centuries, Madam President. If you give the order, we can begin activation immediately. But once we start this process, there will be no going back. What exactly are we activating? Kim asked. Our inheritance. Choi replied mysteriously. What humanity was given when we first reached for the stars. Our ancestors called them gifts, but they were really responsibilities. The responsibility to protect not just ourselves, but the entire galaxy. Kim did not fully understand what he meant, but she could hear the weight in his words. Whatever these gifts were, they were powerful and dangerous. But with the hegemony threatening to enslave all of humanity, she had no choice. Begin activation, she ordered, and may God help us all.